Hello to everybody who is watching this video at the moment. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the things that are circulating throughout my mind for some time now. And these are the things that I have discovered over the past few months more specifically, and over the couple of years in general. So today I'm going to be talking about this phenomenon of interpretation of the real world. In other words, how we differentiate in our fantasies and our interpretation of the world and its actuality and what its reality is composed of. So I'll walk you through this imagination trip, this fantasy world where you get to differentiate between the actuality and the fantasy, and how it is going to be counterproductive and counterintuitive to hold to your fantasies, and why being a realist in this manner, why understanding the reality as it is going to propel you towards prosperity and integrity, and how it is going to foster your development of your psyche and personality and of your overall general character. So first off, let me tell you this way. Oftentimes when running through this path of life, let's say for the lack of the better world, you encounter people and circumstances and challenges that baffle you at times, that just compel you to question everything about it. Maybe it's a person of the opposite gender that you are completely head over heels in love with. Maybe it's an infatuation stays in the relationship, and then you've formulated an ideal picture of what that person is like, and you've fantasized and imagined what their actual life entails and what their actual personality is made up of, and you dream of that sort of hypothesis and idea over and over again, and solidify it in your own imagination, and then you try to act it out, meaning you try to act with that person or with that circumstance as if the formulation of your imagination is accurate, as if your interpretation is real. And then when you act it out and the response that comes as a consequence is contrary to your expectation, then you start to question the whole fabric of reality and its constituent elements. So for instance, you've imagined a certain person to have certain characteristics based on their appearance, or let's say you've had a 5-minute conversation with them, and they had a good impression on you, and then you made a very innocent and very, nonetheless, albeit small but skewed representation of their personality. And then the next time you encounter that person, you acted out your fantasized imagining and your expectations as to how that person will react. But since in actuality that person's personality is not commensurate with your imagination and fantasy, the response that you receive is quite different than what you had expected. Now what happens is you start to feel sometimes betrayed and hurt, because you may think, well, why did that person act in a manner that is not commensurate with their personality? And why you bereft yourself with these questions. but you also have to take into consideration the fact that they are not the person of your imagining. They are not what they claim to be. Well, for the most part, in the first few minutes of your conversations with one another, they are not that person. Well, Jung talked about this concept of persona, a public face that we carry with ourselves to facilitate our movement forward in the social realm. And so you've encountered that. You've encountered a persona, not a real person, let's say, for the lack of a better word. And so think about it. It's a very narrow and skewed view, because you've completely discarded all the other aspects of that person. Well, in reality, you cannot take into account all the other aspects of any person, but that does not necessarily mean that you have to completely disregard or disqualify all the other aspects of a person's personality. Well, you don't know that the person that you're infatuating about, in this case, could be pervert or could be psychologically unhealthy, let's say, or maybe that person is, well, irritating to you. Well, we don't know. We really don't know why people get irritated by other people's actions. So you may get irritated easily by another person's like just the way they hold their hands, just the way they make their gestures, just the way they talk. These simple and oftentimes innocuous way of behaving can trigger that irritation detecting mechanism in your psyche. So, well, you may not have identified this mechanism in the person of your infatuation the first time you have a conversation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have any right to disregard that aspect of their personality. And so if you carry on with this sense of idealization, pedestalization, and fantasization of that person, then later on, when you encounter the real face, when that person reveals their true character, their unglamorous and humane and primitive and biologically based characteristics, then you're going to be appalled, you're going to be detested, and you're going to be grotesquely let's say, you're going to be very disenchanted by that revelation. So my advice, I should say, or that's a strong word, I advocate the viewers, the listeners who are listening to my video, to actually understand the human psychology and to think through people's behavior carefully, and not to underestimate what people are capable of, and not to disregard the other parts of people's personality, and to take, well, all the other aspects into account. And you may ask this question, well, how am I supposed to know what the other person is like? And, well, it has a very truly complex answer, because you're not going to be able to understand a person completely in just a few minutes. You certainly have to spend some time with them. But a good general rule of thumb is, you are a human being. The person you're dealing with is a human being. So by this similarity, your psychic characteristics are similar to that person's characteristics to some extent. Well, I would say it's the same. It's largely the same. The majority of you is the majority of that person, the same, and it's the idiosyncrasies, the oftentimes useless and irrelevant and unique idiosyncrasies that differentiate you and me, right? So maybe a person writes with the left hand, maybe you write with the right hand, maybe you like to watch Netflix, the other person likes to watch YouTube. This is something very, very insignificant as far as I'm concerned. But what I'm talking about is the fundamental desire, the fundamental motivation, the fundamental drive, the fundamental structural makeup of your physical being and of your psychic being is quite similar. So again, it boils down to understanding yourself before understanding other people. So there's this verse in Bible, know thyself, which is absolutely very beautifully written, but has a lot of meaning to it. If you can unpack it, if you can understand it completely, it has a far-reaching consequence. So if you can understand yourself properly, then you can project that knowledge into other person's character, and then you can understand that person as well. For instance, if you know that you can be angry and jealous and malevolent and deceitful, then you can also understand that the other person can be angry, malevolent, deceitful, and violent and jealous, right? All the evil that is inside of you is also inside of the other person. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. I hope you garnered a lot of educational material from this. I'm trying to work out on my English, so forgive me if it's not up to the mark. As long as it's comprehensible and as long as I'm making sense, then I think I've done my job and I've served the community well. Thank you.